at the moment, a lot of people are feeling the cost of living pressure, and therefore they feel that, oh, my CPF money is not growing fast enough. Will I have enough to retire? Also, a lot of people are using their CPF to support not just themselves, but also their family members, so that further sort of deplete the amount that they have to build up their nest egg, right? So a lot of people are in the sandwich generation, right? So
at the end of the day, you plan based on your information now, but it is an entire national scheme that could change at a moment's notice. To me, if you have the ability to, just relying on CPF for retirement is going to be very challenging.
My point of view is that it is true that a lot of people find it hard to trust CPF because of these changes, right? And I'm not saying the CPF is doing a bad job, right? But if you keep changing, I very hard to trust you. That is first principle across the board. Anything.
It's like Trump and terrorists and uncertainty,
Yeah,
right? It's
it's
the
like-
uncertainty that kills you.
Yeah, exactly.
If I know, I can plan.
Exactly. So like I mean, now everybody just think like, what the hell is going to happen to the US, right? Like, because you keep changing, like we don't know the game anymore, right? So I can understand when there's a bunch of Singaporeans, a sizable bunch, it's not small, right? That will feel like CPF don't know can trust not, right? But it's also the other side of how systems have to evolve to meet the realities of today, right? Welcome back to TFC 2025 GE Special. I'm your host, Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and I'm joined with Adrian.
I'm Adrian, LinkedIn top noise, fractional CMO, and author of a book. Hey, I just got trended. Wake
For
Up
LinkedIn
Singapore.
Top Noise?
No, Wake Up Singapore posted something that I shared on LinkedIn.
What?
So I'm not sure if you know, but if you were to Google mushroom soup recipe, PAP website actually ranked number 1. Which one of number 1? So I post about it and he went like wildfire.
SEO specialist.
They don't care what keyword.
Just give me a ranking. Okay. Yeah. It is a phenomenon, with the digital world. Yes, welcome back to another episode of our live stream. Shout out to our friends on Instagram. So yes, since you're on Instagram, just want to give another shout out that the optimal experience is on YouTube. Go to YouTube. That is the best place to enjoy. If not, you can wait for post, because this episode we will post produce it, and this episode is in partnership with our live stream partners at Community and Position 5. So yeah, thank you for supporting us over the course of the many days. We couldn't do it ourselves, and yeah, we are back in studio with friends of the show. For our audience that don't know you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. The least important guest here, so I'll start. Anthony, I'm a co-host on a lot of the TFC shows, but today I'm here to talk about fashion.
You've got a lot of things to say.
I have a lot of things to say about a lot of things.
Yeah. But this one especially,
this one is about money, so especially
a lot
close
of things.
to my heart.
Yes. And Alex?
hello, I'm Alex, former regulator, former CFO and Chief Actuary of insurance company. Now I'm a freelance actuarial consultant.
Awesome. So we have enough interesting people, right, to talk about this interesting topic.
I actually have a degree in actuarial studies, and I think this might be the first time people have used interesting actuary in the same sentence.
Yeah.
It's the impression is that it's the most boring job ever. Yeah.
Why?
Because I think you just look at numbers, and it's a very risk calculated.
But isn't that modeling is very interesting? No, okay, maybe to a small subset of people.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are part of that smaller subset of people that find modeling and trying to figure and solve problems are very interesting. So there is a big problem that is looming, which is retirement adequacy. Right? Of course, is multifaceted, this problem, because it's about the spending today, the spending in the future, your personal spend, the state's spend. There's a lot of different elements that come together to paint this idea of retirement adequacy. But I think for us, we'll start with the CPF discussion, right? Because I think that it's kind of, most of our audience care about it. A lot of time they got money sitting there. It's like, when can I use this, right? So there's all that. And I think the different parties, in the essence of GE, have put up different policy positions. Right, so we would like to discuss that. Okay, so maybe for a start, give us a sense on the ground. What do you think of the CPF policy today?
Well, I think at the moment, a lot of people are feeling the cost of living pressure, and therefore they feel that, oh, my CPF money is not growing fast enough. Will I have enough to retire, right? But of course, also a lot of people are using their CPF to support not just themselves but also their family members, so that further sort of deplete the amount that they have to build up their nest egg, right? So a lot of people are in the sandwich generation, right? So yeah, the pressure is real. Yeah.
So the ambiguity of the numbers actually affects the kind of confidence that people have in terms of their planning, right? Because when I look at the overall, there are certain first principles to planning, right? And everybody knows those principles, or at least I think our audience are select lah, so they understand how do you put a price to it, model it backwards, contribute to it, the whole thing. But your models are all collapsing because the numbers are flying all over the place these days, and I do think that's a big part of what's causing anxiety lah.
Yeah, but I mean that's always been a bit of my view of CPF. But like at the end of the day, sure, there's a scheme, there's a pot of money you put in. You kind of understand where the money goes and how it's derived and all of that, right? That's all quite public information. But what you cannot account, and maybe this is me being a lawyer, what you cannot account for is policy change, right? Something happening, whether it's a few years back, changing retirement age and linking back to CPF withdrawal, to last year's hoo-ha about CPF shielding, right? Like at the end of the day, you plan based on your information now, but it is an entire national scheme that could change at a moment's notice that you don't know about. So to me, if you have the ability to, just relying on CPF for retirement is going to be very challenging. Unless you are near enough. If you are 5-10 years out, sure, you should start planning and be all that. But if you are a bit younger like us, 20-30 years away, how do you plan for something 20-30 years away? Like you try to value a company, you can't value a company 20 years out, right? It's same thing for CPF, same thing for policy risk.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge, exciting part you mentioned about the constant change.
No lah. No, okay. So I'm actually very I feel for them lah. Okay, so my point of view is that it is true that a lot of people find it hard to trust CPF because of these changes, right? And I'm not saying the CPF is doing a bad job, right? But if you keep changing, I very hard to trust you. That is first principle across the board. Anything.
It's like Trump and terrorists and uncertainty, right? It's the uncertainty that kills you.
Yeah, exactly.
If I know, I can plan.
Exactly. So I mean, now everybody just think what the hell is going to happen to the US, right? Like, because you keep changing, we don't know the game anymore, right? So I can understand when there's a bunch of Singaporeans, a sizable bunch, it's not small, right, that will feel like CPF don't know can trust not, right? But it's also the other side of how systems have to evolve to, meet the realities of today, right? So if the system don't change, like you're still using Windows, not Windows are not bad, like from 2000, right? Then you sure lose one, right? So the systems need to change. But as the change keeps happening and we do not do things like grandfather policy in, we just this is national, we change. It does affect a lot of people, right? I think that's a fair statement, right?
Correct. But us being an open economy, a lot of these change are sort of in the context is sort of forced on us. So for example, I don't believe that the planners 30, 40 years ago would expect the fertility rate to drop so fast. Right, they may not expect the increase in longevity to be so fast. Right, they may not expect that the extent of money printing from GFC and COVID. So, because one of the key issue of the design is that when we put money in CPF, right, we get a credited interest rate to the different accounts. So when you talk about interest rate, effectively this is a fixed income kind of instrument. And any fixed income instrument, you are the most vulnerable to inflation and money printing. You just erode the nominal value away. Right. So, of course, at the start of CPF, let's say in the 1950s, where there's no equity market, so using a fixed income oriented design is probably fair. But in the 70s, we start to have a stock market here. In the 80s, we have GIC. So, arguably, we can start to have a better or a higher mixed allocation to growth assets, right? Be it property or equities in that design instead of just staying on a fixed income-based regime. Then it would probably shield you better from the inflation. issue.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so very quickly you want to go into the topic already. So just to add on that, because I do think like time before inflation like really came raveling, right? Maybe not too long ago, I think the past 5 years before inflation was up, and of course post CPF life change, MediShield life, all those things, right? Actually, I thought people were quite happy with CPF. Right, because there were updates to the system and the interest rates were like, okay, not the best, but okay, I can accept. But when inflation came and like rallied the whole thing up, right, for the past 2 years, right, and then this whole question, starts to set in, right? It's like, then still 2.5, a bit jialat, right? Like my money is with you, right? Like to be fair, you are the custodian of my retirement, right? In the CPF structure, right? It's my money, yes, but you are holding on to the money and you are paying me X amount of returns, right? On that, or X amount of interest on that. And now the inflation is 5, but now it's come down a bit, but you're still at 2.5. Right. So, if this thing drags on, it actually negatively impedes the wider population.
Correct.
Right. So I think that's kind of where the discussions of these ideas start to come in.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So that sets the ground. Okay. So yeah, in the essence of GE, we're going to look at the different party manifesto. So similar to how we did in the previous few policy discussions, I think the easiest way is to look at the PAP ones first, because, they are the governing party. All the ideas are, in some shape or form theirs. Although I know we have a very big public service, they create a lot of these ideas. Okay, but you must sign off. Somebody signs off, right? So the minister signs off and they're part of the party. Okay.
This segment very short, only 3 items.
You don't need to read the PAP manifesto. You see the actions.
Yeah. Fair. But maybe you can share a bit the manifesto.
So the first one, provide matching grants for voluntary top-ups to your CPF MediSave account. That's first. Review and enhance our CPF system. Very motherhood.
Sure.
Increase senior worker CPF contribution rates. Those are the 3 items.
Yeah. So I don't know what
I mean, if you're not reviewing and enhancing, I don't know what you're doing.
I don't know what you're doing. So that is like a motherhood statement that everybody is subscribing to, right? So yeah, it's like telling me making our lives a better place. Like making Singapore a more livable environment. So of course, everyone agrees.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, who doesn't want that, right? You're not running on that, you're out, right? So everybody runs on that platform. Tell us how lah, right? So as much as I can cut the PAP some slack because of like they are ruling and they have been running this for a while, so you have some sort of sense of like this is how they run it, so I can give them some slack. But from a comparing manifesto standpoint, right, it's still like, can you tell us a bit more? You're trying to get a job, right? Like, give us a bit more lah, right? Yeah.
I think what seems quite clear to me, at least from the outside, is that CPF has moved away from being purely a retirement scheme. Right, so we think about CPF a lot in the sense that I can only take my money at 60 something, whatever the retirement age is now. My SA is locked up, but along the way, as things have changed, as policies have changed, we have opened up CPF to so many other purposes, right? We have CPF OA for housing that we can, because if you don't want your money to be eroded by 5% inflation, then you take it out of OA lah, right? You have MediSave to cover off your medical spending, and you have and then you have your SA, which is essentially untouched, right? So I think that seems to be what they are doing, and I think they've come out to say it as well, that your retirement, you cannot count only on CPF or CPF Life. It's a part of it, and maybe it's there to provide a core of what your retirement lifestyle should be. But if you want more, then you have to have your own other savings. Don't just rely on CPF or like 1M65 or 4M65 or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Any thoughts here?
Well, in a sense, to allow people to use the CPF money to buy house is not necessarily the wrong thing. It's just how much you allow them to deploy to housing. Because after all, when you say you build the nest egg, after that you have to decumulate, right? And part of the decumulation you have to spend on the roof above your head, right? If, as what we have discussed in like 3 days ago, if you think
which will
about
come out soon,
your 99-year lease as a prepayment of rent for 99 years, then if you can lock in a good fixed rental until you die, it's a decent retirement plan, right?
It's great.
Yeah. but not 100% of your retirement is just for the roof, right? You still need to eat, right?
Okay, fair. I mean, that's the system that we are familiar with, right? So it is what it is. And we've done many discussions with CPF, and I think CPF is going to come on the show soon to talk about their planners.
Still
and all
haven't,
that.
should already.
Yeah. Soon, so I'm finalizing, right? So we are in close contact and we understand what they are trying to do, but that being said, there's still a lot of discussion that can happen around like what is the next phase, like how can you evolve, right? And I think that's the contestation of ideas across the board in this GE, okay? So maybe let's look at the simple one. The simple one is the SDP one because
I don't think it's that simple.
Okay. No. The simple one is why I call it the simple one, because they are not tweaking on the existing system. They want a different system.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So this is why it's when I look at it, I say, okay, simple, right? It's a totally different thing, right? So what the STB is suggesting is to abolish the CPF minimum sum, right? And then they want to introduce a broader silver support scheme to support 80% of the people, and then of course enhance lease buyback. The nitty-gritty is one thing, but I think the broad essence is let's just remove CPF as the custodian for retirement. Essentially, like, okay, at the end, once you collect your money, then you can take, you can do what you want to do, right? So don't have CPF life, no, because no minimum sum by extension means no CPF life, okay. But I think what Anthony was trying to say is the most different one, because you got to see it in tandem with all their other policy suggestion, right? So maybe you can share with us a little bit.
Yeah, so I think where they are coming from is we really think about CPF not so much for retirement, right? So you have saved, the government has given you a certain risk-free rate, SA and things like that, you have accumulated through your working career. And then when you hit your retirement age, instead of going through another annuity plan or another forced savings for a few more years, you just take the whole thing back, right? Which is the no minimum retirement. But once you've taken the whole thing back, I'll support you as a government in other ways, right? Whether, I make your healthcare a bit cheaper.
Quite a lot cheaper. Yeah, that's their plan.
I give you a bit more of a social safety net, some sort of income that is not based on your CPF money. Or if you have already run out of money, I do a bigger lease buyback so you can monetize your current apartment, right? So I think it's a whole package of retirement policies, right? That is, sure, you have a CPF lump sum, but you are really, and this moves actually quite towards the idea of CPF is not your main source of retirement, right? You take it out and then you go and manage your own money with some sort of safety nets along the way. So it's interesting. I know I always like, ideas that are out of the current rule book, right? Rather than tweaking around the edges.
Because everyone else is tweaking. So STP is the most interesting
one. So it's like, yes, it's a whole of government, whole of society approach. I don't know what this will mean for the reserves. I think it's a big question, but that's a slightly different topic.
Any thoughts?
Their proposal also make the assumption that when people get their money, they know how to grow it properly, right? And if they don't grow it properly and just waste it away very soon, then your social spending would increase, then the tax may increase.
No, but okay, I understand what you're saying, right? But it's not too difficult to then set up an investment scheme, right?
For our audience, yes.
So I think
I'm not saying for individual. I'm saying it's not too difficult for the state to then run a separate investment scheme that, okay, it's not like you're forced to it. It's not like CPF Life. I not say CPF Life force you, but it's a continuum, right, on what it is. Now the money is back to you. Okay, maybe you take the 500,000. Then you think like, okay, I want the 200,000 for myself. Remaining money I can put with this special investment account. Can be with CPF, can be with someone else. Doesn't matter who manages it, right? Then they run it, and then it's like SA lah, CPF special account.
I think the kind of the PAP establishment objection to that would be the people who need it most will not put their money there. Right? The people who don't have enough for retirement already or who want to enjoy their life, just take the lump sum and they'll spend. Right? That's human nature. And then they'll come back and ask for help. Whereas it's the people who are responsible, who are planning, who have planned for 30 years, will continue planning and investing. And then that becomes a problem of, then you might end up penalizing people who have planned. Right? And that's always the argument against safety nets, right? Once you have too much of a safety net, then people just don't act in their best interest at all.
We also discussed earlier on that CPF as an instrument actually was invented decades ago, which I think to that point for a largely uneducated population back then, it made a lot of sense. But in today's context, at that age, if you can take out money, honestly, I think to Alex, your point, if they cannot manage at that age, I think it's really gone case already. You have like 5-6 decades to learn financial literacy, but You just
But I
refuse to
think the
learn.
reality is that most people are still not financially literate.
I think we are the minorities of the corner, of the internet.
We are minority of a minority.
Yeah, it's true. That's why, sometimes I get pressure on raising our download numbers. And I was like, "No, this is all the people that you're going to listen to these things, right? It's a small group." Yeah. But that being said, I think it's an interesting thought experiment to then start to look at, like, is there a different way to run this whole thing, right? And like what you said, it's a whole suite of policies. So I think that's what I want to encourage people to look at it. So we also talked about the STP housing plan and the STP healthcare plan in the 2 other episodes. And I would strongly urge you to take a look at it as a form of a thought process. Like, what is this other bunch of people?
Challenge your assumptions.
Yeah, challenge
your
assumptions and rethink the whole thing, because I do think that is the process of creating new ideas, right? So, I mean, they as with the existing plan, there are assumptions, their plans also have assumptions, but I think, it's a good crossroad and juncture for us to reevaluate everything, and if you ask me, I genuinely think the STP plans are the most innovative ones. Right, of course, they carry a whole different set of assumptions, right? And that's for you to read. Every plan is 100 over page, When you got time, at the cafe, you can slowly read and enjoy.
Use AI to summarize
Try to
ChatGPT summarize a bit. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where it is, Okay, let's move into the others then. Okay, so for the WP and the PSP, I genuinely think they're all making some tweaks to the existing policy.
Some of them actually have been mentioned for quite some time.
Maybe you can share with us.
So, like the co-investing of CPF savings with GIC, I've read this years ago, and it's still something that they are working on.
Actually, that's one thing that I really want to talk about, right? So, what is the idea here? Okay, so we want to co-invest with GIC. It sounds very nice, right? It sounds very nice, in the sense that you get the upside, rather than 2.5%. Right, so rather than you put 2.5%, you now GIC manage your money. Actually, they already do, but now you get direct market exposure through them, and you potentially get a higher upside, right? So it sounds very sexy, because I do think the underpinning idea is that people just want higher rates,
return,
right? But it calls for the discussion of, like, does this work then, right? So any thoughts here?
Well, on one hand, it's a fair ask. Just now I talked about the whole existing CPF design is a fixed income product, right? But the standard financial advice given to young people is that while you have the runway, you should start with maybe 100% equity, 100% growth assets. So why would you from day one be in 100% fixed income, right? So, but one thing that we have to go back to the legal fact, though, because when you put your money into CPF, what it uses to buy is a special Singapore government security, which is a fixed income, right? That class is a fixed income. From a legal perspective, if you now demand to share the upside, it's like similar to you buying Apple bond instead of Apple shares and expect Apple to share the profit with you. Like, doesn't make sense, right? So the question is, can there be a second class of that Singapore government security that is equity-based, right? Then you sort of toggle the mix of the equity class and the bond class that matches the investment horizon of your current as CPF member mix. So as the CPF membership ages, then you sort of gradually move more towards the bond class, right? While the population is still young, then you have a bigger growth asset class.
To be fair, I think that's what the WP is trying to ask for. It's not to say, like, everything now we invest alongside GIC, right? So I think what they're trying to say is...
But there's a downside to it, though, because if you see it then from, let's say, government perspective, as if you're running a Singapore a company, right, that you try to be as efficient as possible to provide for the entire population instead of the 2/3 that are working, then you want to fill up your capital stack with instruments that are low cost of capital. So CPF money being just a fixed income is a low cost of capital. Therefore, the upside that is earned is actually now funding a lot of people who are not working. So, for example, your education, right? The kids are not working, right? The healthcare subsidy for the old people, they are not working, and so on and so forth. So now if you say for the same headline return, you return more of that investment income back to the CPF owner, therefore it may be at the expense of those who are not working. Then how does it gel with a lot of the opposition manifesto ideas that's helping those that are not working and Yeah. Where's the money going to come from?
Okay, yeah. So I think this is, we have to look at the system in totality, right? As we have learned over the past week. So I think that just to build on the government securities point, what it, as I understand it right now, is that there's this instrument that CPF kind of gives money to Temasek and GIC, right? It's a fixed income, as you said, it's a debt, right? It's an IOU from Temasek and GIC to CPF saying, I will pay you this amount back with interest at this rate, right? And then Temasek and GIC take that money, they invest it.
I think that's an intermediary lah.
Yeah.
I think it's MAS. Is it MS or?
Does it go to MAS first?
MAS first, and MAS will manage on that side. So actually your direct point is, and I know it sounds like technical, but actually it's important. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. But please continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's your people investing the money for you, and it actually feeds back into our budget, right? Because the excess that is above the amount that is returned to CPF, I think right now the PAP says 50% of the excess is like investment returns. It goes back to our national budget that we can spend, right, on social, on whatever the government of the day wants to spend on. So, in a sense, there is already indirect exposure to excess returns, right, of the wealth funds that we have. I think the WP also has a policy of, instead of 50-50, which the PAP kind of admins is a tikam number, we do 60-40 or something, right? Yeah. We take a bit more from that excess return to spend, right? And that's a slightly different discussion. But in a sense, then you see, and maybe this is fairer, right? Because instead of a person who earns a lot putting more money into CPF and getting more equity returns from CPF, the government gets the money instead and can spend it on the underprivileged, right? And then the government takes and this is why responsible government is important, it takes the excess and it puts it towards the causes or the things that we think need more help, rather than just a highly paid individual earning an excess return. Right, so from a perspective, like, I kind of see that it could make some sense if we want to redistribute.
Okay, fair. I understand what you're saying. So just to be clear, I think in the essence of what the WP is trying to do is essentially to try to like get more retirement adequacy for the people, right? So there are other things like, okay, review the CPF OA interest rates, right? And of course, I think enabling the co-investing of CPF money, that's more like, with GIC, it's more like, okay, then GIC runs a fund, then you invest in it. So it's like yourself. But I understand what you're saying. It's like, okay, let's not do that. The upside surplus can be redistributive, right? At the end. Because if the minimum money that you need to keep in the CPF is about 60,000 before you can invest, then the people with 500,000 inside are just going to take the whole thing and push it up, right? I mean, not the whole thing, but they then get the upside through a special co-investment product with GIC, let's say. Okay, it does not need to be GIC, it can be anyone, right? So it's just essentially the government running a investment product, right, directly.
And the wealth gap may actually widen, right?
Yeah. Fair. So if that's the case, right, then there's one other policy in their suggestion, which is to review the CPF OA interest rates, or to introduce like a special dividend, whenever there's an upside. Like when there's surplus, which we do, but so that's kind of like the discussion. Any thoughts on that front?
Well, the special dividend is similar to having the equity exposure stack, right?
Of course.
So that I think is a fair starting point, right? Without excessively damaging the redistribution.
CDC voucher, SG60 voucher, whatever voucher you want to call it, right? Just that maybe what is the key idea there is that there is a fixed mechanism for everybody to share. Right, so rather than relying on the government of the day, on a round number coming up to redistribute, and it being linked to a party or a government, right? This is just excess savings that we have, and we want to share with everybody. And if there is a legal mechanism by which this will always be distributed, then that is, to me, a nice change compared to just relying on the government to say, I give you a voucher, right?
Yeah.
Because then that is a lot more subject to whims and fancies and threats and say, I don't give you if you don't vote me. Right?
Of course. And I think that's the whole. I think in Hong Kong they return the excess taxes that they collect from the people, right? So I think that is something that we could potentially think about, right? So it's not to say return everything, but and you can mask it. You can call it whatever you want to call it, right? You want to call it a dividend,
New Singapore share.
Yeah, whatever, whatever you want to call it. I think it's possibly not just about retirement, but also to kind of like reunite the people around some sort of a social compact. I mean, you want to, redo social compact, right? Then what is the kind of overall benefit for the people? I think that's still very important because you are now trying to renegotiate the social contract with the people, right? I think that's a fair...
Are we renegotiating or are we bullying? Or are we threatening?
Yeah. So we welcome you on the show to talk. Yeah. So I actually quite like Lawrence in the early part of his campaign, but I think slowly as they run out of ideas, they have kind of reverted back to what they are familiar with, which I don't really...
The old playbook.
Yeah, the old playbook, and then start to have all the, this is a game of cards, blah, 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 that whole thing that I really don't like, right? I think we are moved past that. We as an informed citizenry, we're not here to make your life difficult, but we want to participate in the decision-making process of our country, right? You want us to be part of this social compact, you must give us some space to contribute.
You want us to have a stake, then you have to listen, at least pretend to listen.
Yeah, so, that one we leave to the last episode, okay? We will have a last live stream to talk a little bit.
I may not come on, so yes. Can tell my system first.
But I do think there's merit to review the anchor for the OA interest rate because, referencing the three banks, when they use that as an anchor, the way that the bank price their deposit would be very different from today. Today, I think the banks would be much more disciplined in their cost of capital control, their target margin, and so on and so forth. So your deposit rate is getting further and further from risk-free. Right, so maybe we have to sort of refresh a different reference point that is closer to risk-free. Maybe you can pick the Singapore government bond T-bills yield, right? That would be an okay starting point because often the narrative is they look at it from the member's perspective. If you were to invest it yourself, what you would have gotten, right? Especially when they believe that OA, right, give you liquidity, you can spend it on housing, spend it on education, and so on and so forth. It's sort of a demand deposit, so you probably should not earn too far away from risk-free, right? But for those people who don't have that needs for liquidity, then indeed it's illiquid, right? And when instrument is illiquid, there is a premium to it. So there is merit to pay a bit higher than the T-bills.
Hey, welcome to the Financial Coconut Podcast Network. I'm your host, Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut. And if you're loving what we're creating here, like, share, subscribe, share with your loved ones, comment in the comment section below. And we'll see you for great content on Chills with TFC.
Yeah. And I think that would then essentially solve the inflation problem. Yeah. Right, so because you are essentially subjecting it to some sort of a float, which is the T-bills, right, which takes cue from the overall market, right. So I think that could potentially be interesting. I believe the EPF, which is in Malaysia, does have something like that. Which is not a fixed rate; it's a floating rate, and they will announce every year, which I know some people are saying, "Wow, 6%, 7%." Thinking, if I'm the fund manager, I just buy a bunch of buildings in Singapore, and then I slowly, it's like that. I really can hit it because of my ringgit shrink, right? So, but that's a different story, right? But I think bringing back to the CPF structure, right, I do think that there is merit to review this OA as a baseline.
Actually, how are OA rates determined? Because there is a mechanism to go higher.
There is some sort of a mechanism.
2.5 is a floor. We have just get a floor for like the past decade.
If the three banks' deposit rate is higher than that, then it will go.
Yeah.
So whenever will the deposit rates ever be higher than 3? Even in the higher interest rate environment, their deposit rates never went up, right? It's all special deposit rates.
It may be because all of us were too young. Maybe our parents at that time, they did have a deposit rate that is higher than 2.5.
Okay, so we need to go back 30 years.
Yeah, so yes. Just like how in the past, some ILPs make sense, right? So, but anyway, that's a different story. So, so I think that could be something that we really look at it, right? So I do think there's some merit to this, right?
But, if and going to a point on illiquidity premium, right? If you are not going to use your OA, why can't you just put it back into an SA and lock it up?
No, but it's one way.
Then you get paid 4%.
Yeah, so but it's one way. So that's
right?
a problem, right? Because it's one way. So there's a difference if let's say it's one way for 3 years. Something like that, right?
I can't give you an illiquidity premium for things that could potentially be liquid again.
Of course. So then, but if today at 30 years old you park it in, that is 30 years.
Yes.
So
maybe it's a mechanism to take it out. Like
No, if people don't mind, you should actually let them, right? What's wrong with that?
Now, of course, also I'm not saying it's wrong, but if we are just pushing that responsibility down to the people to say that, okay, it is in your prerogative to decide how you want to do that, then the choice is very limited in that sense, right? Because now you want to give it to the people, you must give them choice. You cannot give it to the people and say there's one choice. Then that is not giving it to the people, right?
Yes and no. If you are, let's say, invest in private equity that, let's say, you use 7, 8, 9, 10, they will have a lockup period. So it's a choice. You can choose not to have that additional yield, right?
Yeah, for sure. So okay, then if we push our mind a little bit on that, right? So if let's say today we allow OA to be floating tied to a T-bills, okay, should we also allow SA to float then in that sense? Or so then it also ties to a T-bill as a reference, right? Or something. Yeah.
No, especially when earlier I mentioned that there should be an equity tier, equity class of that instrument there. So therefore, it will float, and it may not even be by interest rate. It may be by actually the actual earned return of whatever you're participating in.
And it could be negative.
I mean, government, you try to float at zero, right?
Yeah, but that creates the asymmetry, right? Because if it's for retirement planning and it's for long term, especially for the SA, you have to give a floor, I think, because you don't want them to be eroded. So
it may not have to be okay. So since I come from the insurance background, right? So many of you may have this kind of product called participating product, right? Then bonus can go up and down, right? But at least internally we have this what we call estate or a smoothing reserve. Right. So if it goes down, I give you a floor of 0 first, but when the thing recovers first, I try to plug the whole of that deficit before fully redistributing the excess back to you. So it can smooth out that volatility, I think.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that's difficult to...
Yeah, it's highly technical. We should get CPF come and talk.
Yeah, no, so I get you, right? I think that, but in terms of a national retirement plan, right, I think it's one of those things where it's going to be difficult to implement, right? Because even now, like my in-laws or my parents, they look at their CPF, right? And they are very reassured that the amount is always there. The amount will never go down. The amount always goes up, right? And to them, that is a bit of a safety net. Right. Whereas I think, if you expose too much, and there has to be a balance, right? And we can have a debate about personal responsibility. But if you expose too much to market gyrations,
correct.
right? Then you start moving away from this idea of CPF as kind of like a minimum for your retirement safety net.
So that's why earlier we talked about the asset mix has to sort of gel with which stage of your life you are in, right? So at the for young people, it may be 100% exposure to the equity tier, right? So for your parents or your in-laws, right, they may be 80% to the fixed income tier. Only the 20% is fluctuating. So they will still see a large part of their money being fairly safe, right?
Yeah, no. So I think maybe that's where I'll differentiate, because I've a lot of friends my age, right? Our age, early 30s, and they are just scared of the equity market, right? Refuse to buy any equities. STI, DBS, OCBC, US, VWRA, REITs, whatever. Just don't want exposure. Or my exposure is about 5%, 10% of my total portfolio. But I want to buy Singapore property. I want to, decouple and buy a second property. It's a mindset thing, I feel, that, sure, we all like returns, right? And I think among our audience, a lot of us believe quite fundamentally or have faith in the equity markets, right? And of course, in this case, in the ability of Temasek and GIC and our investors. But, I think there is a bit of a mental solace in there being fixed income, right? And that being the default position. If people want to take more risk with their money, they should. And I think the OA does that already by allowing that for certain, types of equity instruments through endowers and things like that. But at the end of the day, if we are not deviating too far from CPF as retirement, then the bulk of it, right, being fixed income, I think makes sense, because it just makes people feel safer.
In fact, indirectly, you already allude to the solution, right? The preference to move money into the private property market is because they see it as a safe place, right? The best way is to just shake them out of it.
allowing the price to fall, right? Then they're like, please, I need to buy a house, please.
That's another podcast. Yes. We had a discussion. So check that out. I think it's going out tomorrow. Yeah.
But it sounds to me, it's again going back to what we discussed earlier on. As an instrument, it seems to be a one-size-fits-all right now. And catering to what they perceive to be a whole bunch of financially illiterate people, which is why
I don't think
everything
CPF
is...
like that word. But anyway, yeah.
we take care of our people, right? We don't call it paternalistic.
yeah.
We take care of our people.
Yeah. Fair. No, but I like the interesting point of view where, okay, so now the existing situation is the surplus, goes back to NIR. Right, so essentially, right, you make the money, in the markets, then used through the NIL model, it goes back to the budget and then redistribute across social policies, right? And although this sounds like some of these ideas of like whether is it a new investment scheme, which could work, especially for the older retirees that they now they have their lump sum, then they need to put their money somewhere. Then okay, there's a co-investment scheme somewhere. You can look at that rather than just let the open market decide whatever. The CPF could create some of these like in-house investment schemes that you can sign up for sure, or even adjusting some of this special dividend or like OA. It is the real tussle is between like, do you want the state to run most of the things or do you want to give it back to the people and then they can do their own thing, right?
So the answer is actually CPF actually published a report on the CPF IS investment results.
Yeah, which is horrible.
Yeah, so there's already a threshold for you to even to allow you to deploy some of your money into CPF IS. So those with very minimal balance are not even eligible, right? For those who manage to deploy, right, 20% got negative return, 20% get less than 2.5. So therefore, I would challenge the notion of how well educated in people in choosing.
Yeah.
Actually, this was a few years back, right?
It's the 2016 to 23.
Yeah, and I think that there is a very marked shift as well because and this might, and if we look at it, if we do a 2030 report, I actually might think it would be quite different. The results would be quite different in the sense that CPF IS was never broadly available in a lot of different instruments, right? I think at that time you pretty much you had some of the blue chips, I think, and then the STI, and then that was about it. I think it's only in the past 4 or 5 years that it has really broadened out to your whole world equity type instruments, and all of that. So I think factually they are correct. I think the market and how people react and how people use CPF OA and CPF IS has changed, especially with a lot of the robos coming in and pushing for a globally diversified equity exposure.
Yeah. Okay. And I think to be fair, I think PSP has a similar idea, I would say, which is to create a lifetime retirement investment scheme, which, I mean, no matter how you splice it, right, whether is it WP or PSP, they just word it kind of differently. It's all about having some sort of a investment scheme that the state will carry some responsibility because it's not just an open market product, right? And then generate a higher return for the participants, right? Essentially, that's the idea. And they they essentially draw from the recommendation from CPF Advisory Board to have a new lifetime retirement investment scheme. Okay, so the broad ideas are out there. All the correct keywords are low cost, simple to understand, well diversified, professionally managed, blah, 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 blah. So everything is essentially correct, right? So from that point of view, and I think based on after what we've discussed, right, do you think that this is where CPF is already intending to move towards? Or, is it a place that they could really seriously consider? Because as much as we went through the technicalities of adjusting OA, adjusting SA, all those things. So if let's say all those things stay constant, right, and now it's just about opening up a different line of investment product that has some sort of a market risk returns, but still it's a bit more managed because the state runs it, is that an ideal strategy for now?
I think it would be, yeah, so long as we can keep to diversify and low cost, right?
So whatever name you slap on it, right, GIC, Temasek, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, different name of CPF investment scheme also.
I don't know, like if you said, would you take your OA out and say that, you instead of getting your OA 2.5%, you get your Temasek return, your actual Temasek return net of fees, or your actual GIC return net of fees? I might say no, right? I want my 2.5%. right? Because in the context of an entire portfolio, there is a place for fixed income. There is a place for there being stable returns, right? Do I want my 2.5 to be 3 if it's risk-free? Sure, right? But at the end of the day, especially for OA, if I want to take low-cost, globally diversified instruments, they're there. They are not that expensive. They are much cheaper than Temasek. And if you look at GIC, their 10, 20-year, actual real returns is 3.9%, right? So plus inflation, maybe it's like 6-7%. Are you getting that much more out of it, right? Especially if you're comparing to SA 4%. Because if you want to co-invest with them or you want to put money with them for them to give returns, they'll lock you up, right? Like any other fund. So, I think that is kind of the deliberation to me, if you open it up, that 4% I definitely want it risk-free, right? I'm not touching that. 2.5%, maybe I can take a bit more risk, but I already have options there anyway. So maybe not.
Yeah, man. This is a thought experiment, right? Essentially, we are discussing. And I think, okay, so thinking of all these things accumulating together, I think what will be very interesting would then be to essentially let the OA rate to float, tied to some sort of a T-bill element, right? Then that could essentially mitigate the inflation, because inflation is a big problem, for long wind type of product, right? So that could be the most interesting one, but that is not on anybody's platform.
It's not.
Nobody talks about it. So yeah, it is.
But I think actually that makes sense, because at the end of the day, even if it's fixed income, right, it's a cost of funding for Temasek and GIC. And what reason is there for the cost of funds being from CPF that is relatively locked up to be cheaper than, let's say, Astria bonds, right? That is also a cost of funds for them, right? Like, why should my CPF money be given to these investors more cheaply than what they can raise at the private market?
And some of your CPF members are sacrificing a fair bit of liquidity.
Yeah. Quite a fair bit.
Yeah, so maybe from the perspective, it's not like, and we look at it as cost of capital, right? It's not that it's not that the risk-free rate should increase. It's that Temasek and GIC goes out to the market and borrows at this rate. Why is my money cheaper? I don't know.
Yeah, fair. And then they'll tell you because the profit is redistributed back to the system.
Maybe,
blah.
but no, tell me like, and I think that's my problem, right? I am very open to being convinced, but you need to make the effort to explain. You cannot just say it's like that because it's like that.
And then you start fear-mongering us, right? Okay. we hold that. That will be for the last day.
Shall we look at some of the really interesting aspects of CPF?
All the fun things.
Yeah, all the fun things. Let's start with
I thought all these technical things were fun. Okay, never mind.
Clearly, we are a small corner of the internet. But yes, let's help make it a bit more fun.
So there is one proposal by SDP, which is to basically tap on your CPF when you are retrenched. So going to the angle where CPF actually expands itself into a different instrument altogether. What's your thoughts on that? Solving immediate pain.
Okay, this is the actually I have some thoughts about this because the EPF tried this. Right, so the EPF tried this during the COVID crisis, and now the problem is very big because I think they published a report. I can't remember how many percent, but a big amount of people are essentially retirement inadequate. As a result of providing the liquidity to go out to the people, right? So that part I would caution. Right, I think the current, I think what SDP is trying to achieve probably is some sort of like a safety net for the people, right? So there are many ways to go about it, and I think if we believe that we want people to essentially contribute to their retirement when they are there, then maybe it's okay for the state to then step in now, to pay for the safety net now, rather than have a whole bunch of people that draw out there. At the end, it actually becomes riskier and riskier as they age out, right? Because your earning capacity have a general tendency to go. Of course, with AI, I think things were different because it tapers the health element to jobs and all that, right? So that's a different discussion. But the earning propensity of an individual tends to fall over time. So it becomes riskier and riskier if you have lesser and lesser money as you age out, right? So I think the EPF tried it, doesn't work. I don't really...
Or knowing our CPF is you must return with interest.
Yeah.
Once you get back on the period, return with interest.
Even more taunting. Right, So I mean, but
might as well borrow from Along.
But to be fair,
but
to be fair, I think what SDP is driving at is a much bigger point, which is about support retrenchment. And I think that whole thing, we did a little bit of discussion previously, and broadly speaking, I am very glad to see that all the parties are moving down that path, right? Because that is the new reality of the day, right? Whatever skill set that you picked up last time, you can like eat on it for 20 years, right? Then it became 10 years. Now, don't even know that shit can last 5 years now. You learn a thing and then the market catches up and then it moves on, right? So with the cyclicality of how the world is moving and how skills are being monetized, then I'm very glad that all the parties are moving down. Of course, you can argue whether is it effective, efficient, all those things. That is the technicalities of policies. But across the board, I think all of them are moving down that one path. So that is good.
But the other point about retrenchment is more whether are you already over leveraged before you get retrenched, right? So a preventive thing could be to avoid people being over leveraged.
Yeah.
And if most of the time it is due to the property price, then further tighten.
You see, Alex has a theme there.
Like shaking people out of this over-reliance.
Yeah. Okay. Fair.
But okay, I guess for me, going back to the STP, right? I just don't agree with this, right? I think CPF is convoluted enough. We should have, and maybe it's coming from a systems perspective, right? We should have a clear goal for what we want CPF to achieve. We want to provide a rainy day fund for retrenchment. That's a different goal. Sure, it's your own money. It should be like savings. So I get the theoretical underpinning of that. But at the end of the day, if the core belief is that CPF, especially SA, is primarily to support a chunk of a retirement, then let's stop adding to it. In fact, I think one of the other parties made it better. Let's reduce it back, right? We have different schemes for different purposes. We put money into different schemes for different purposes, and then everything is very clear rather than having to make weird trade-offs along the way.
Yeah. Because I'm sure the people that are running it at the back will have to see all these trade-offs, right? And then they'll be like, oh, but then if we let people use for this, then what about the others?
Because once the CPF is liquid, then you can't the cost of funding is different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other things you want to bring out? Any other things you guys found interesting? No, I thought that was a good discussion.
Not in their manifesto though. So
Yeah.
I mean, go back to the point of when you're in retirement, what do you have to spend on, right? If the cost of living problem, let's say food, all this continues to get a lot more expensive, then your retirement savings have to grow enough to catch up. Right. One way to sort of hedge it is that why can't, as a nation, we start going around the world to buy up resources that grows food and minerals, and also buy up companies that are owning the infrastructure to have to transport this stuff into Singapore. So effectively, the world becomes our farm and whatever backyard, right? So once you control the cost of living, then you have less pressure to grow your investment return.
It's true.
Right. In fact, if we look at the longer cycle of human history, you can't eat gold, nor can you eat Bitcoin. Right. It's actually the land that allows you to sort of hide in one corner, let the whatever war blow over, and you still have that purchasing power or that lowest part of the Maslow hierarchy of needs fulfilled.
I think previously we talked about this, right? It's about the Singapore not having an infrastructure fund, right? Which is, this is in some ways an infrastructure fund. It's just that we're not building something lah. We are trying to own farmland and all those things, right? Because now two of our major investment vehicles are either investing in the markets to maximize, market returns, which is GIC, or the other one, which is to invest in long-term value, to derive the type of growth, right, through Temasek, right? But there's no clear objective of like, let's own farms, let's own orchids, all those type of things. Okay,
but there's a real geopolitical problem to this, right? Because you know who tried this? China. They bought so much farmland in Australia, they got blocked. And the Australian government passed a law. And now any Chinese company in any sector, not any sector, a certain list of sectors, primarily commodities and farmland, want to invest in a foreign company, even if it's a minority stake. It's subject to review and most likely blocked. Right? So, I think it's a good idea. I agree with you. I think maybe our position from China is very different. We are not enemies, so potentially it could work, right?
And diversify basically.
And to be clear, I think our goal, if let's say we were to set up a fund, right? So to imagine this idea, right? Let's say we were to set up a fund. I think our goal is not to generate alpha. Right.
It's to buy up fund.
It's to
feed ourselves.
Right. So if we have 2 million, 3 million people, we have a much more population that is beyond the citizenship, but everybody add together, even if everyone is about 6 million. Right, so 6 million people, you really don't eat as much as like 1 point something billion people.
Yeah.
Right? So it should be quite okay lah, right? If we were to do it,
I think
and then
it's
surplus we
doable.
can share with the region. There are many ways to structure this, right? Like whether is it scholarships exchange, which we already do, right? We already give scholarships to the people, and then it's in some ways it's an exchange of like value. That I think in some ways the Singapore that we know of the past probably needs to kind of review of like what is our core value to the world going forward, especially to the region, right? Because we have been a port for a long time, and I think the region don't quite need us as a port if the world is going to kind of change in such a big way. So
I mean, this just feels like a strategic reserve type of
exactly.
thing, right?
So it could be slowly grown if we explore it.
And
so
maybe not my CPF money. Definitely don't want equity exposure to that.
I don't think that's a CPF money thing. I think Alex brought it up as a form of like, okay, let's get assurance in terms of retirement because it is true. No matter like all the things we talk about the plan, okay, I get it, right? But if inflation numbers keeps going crazy, it's not gonna help us to plan. And there's specific categories in our personal finances, like medical itself, right? It's nuts, right? The kind of inflation in that categories, how to plan, like no matter how much you tampa into that thing, right? It's just not gonna work, right?
Well, which goes back to the other point that we talked about 3 days ago in the live stream, right? Because how much you need for retirement is the running cost times the number of years, right? But if you redefine what is a good life, right, the number of years reduce, right, give people a choice to have a different view of what retirement means.
True. I would like an upper limit on my age, yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a different discussion.
So remember to watch the episode 3 days later, 3 days ago.
It just went out today, so as a podcast. Okay, great.
That,
Yes. Awesome. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for tuning with us at the TFC GE Special. Today, we're only doing 1 hour, okay, because I think we want to get all the other politicians, but they are all ramping up. So now it's a high-risk situation. They will be very selective of where they go to.
They also don't say wrong thing.
Yeah, they also don't say wrong thing because now it's the last few days, right? So high-risk situation, unfortunately, we couldn't be the platform for them to talk about the things that they want to talk about. It's okay, we understand.
Next time, 5 years later, we chop you first.
5 years later, I'm not sure we're still doing this, but yeah, hopefully, we 长长久久, we keep doing this. Okay, so yes, thank you for your time. Tomorrow we will be taking a break. So tomorrow we will finally we will be taking a break because we want to get ourselves in the best mode for the last day. Right. So the last day for us will be on the 1st May because after that will be what was that? Cooling off, and then you'll be voting. So please go and vote. Please participate in it. But before that, on the 1st May, we will come in with some big topics lah, right? So one topic that I wanted to bring about is of course identity politics, and the aspirations of the Malay Muslim community because it has become front and center in some of the political discussions. In fact, I would say it has for some reason become front and center, and I have a lot to say about identity politics and racial politics because I spent a lot of time in KL, right? So I know what is racial politics, right? Yeah, no, I never kena because I'm kind of like in between systems, right? So I don't get the brunt of it, but I am very aware of what is race-based politics, right? Because I know the systems there. I've talked to many people, and I don't think any political party in Singapore at this point in time has put up anything that is race-based politics, but it's worth a discussion, right? So we want to have that discussion. And then, of course, at the end, we will take a jab at it to do the very, very difficult thing to do is to hypothesize who will win.
Good luck.
And also have a fun time to talk about some of the high and low moments lah. So thanks for joining us for so many days. I think it's the last leg. We just want to have some fun lah, right? So I genuinely believe that our platform did the hardest job. It's the toughest things to talk about. Everybody was just gossiping about this thing lah, that person lah, what they said lah, like
what they wear lah.
Yeah, very jialat lah. So we did a hard job, and we hope you appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, and with that, we'll see you in 2 days' time. Meanwhile, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Instagram people.
Oh yeah, Instagram. Bye-bye.